How did the ancient Greeks build the Antikythera mechanism? In 1901, a group of Greek sponge divers pulled something out of the sea that the world wasn't ready for. They had been exploring the wreck of an ancient Roman ship near the island of Antikythera, a vessel full of marble statues, golden jewelry, and ancient coins. Treasure, by anyone's measure. But buried among the wreckage, almost completely ignored at first, were a handful of corroded bronze lumps. Dark. Encrusted. Seemingly worthless. They were not worthless. They were the broken remains of the most sophisticated machine the ancient world ever built. A device so advanced, so impossibly precise, that nothing like it would appear again for over 1,000 years. This is the story of the Antikythera mechanism. The world's oldest computer. And one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The year was 1901. A team of Greek sponge divers, sheltering from a storm near the small island of Antikythera in the Aegean Sea, decided to dive into the waters below. What they found on the seabed would change history, though it would take decades for the world to understand why. The wreck was ancient, a Roman-era cargo ship that had sunk sometime around 65 B.C.E., carrying its precious load to the bottom of the sea. The divers recovered statues, coins, glassware, and jewelry, the kind of extraordinary finds that fill museum halls. But among everything they brought to the surface, those strange bronze lumps barely drew a second glance. They were handed over to the Greek government, catalogued alongside the other artifacts, and mostly forgotten. That is, until May 1902, when an archaeologist named Vallejo Staris noticed something unusual about one of the lumps. A gear wheel. Clearly mechanical. Clearly deliberate. Carved with impossible precision from bronze that had spent nearly 2,000 years underwater. Something extraordinary had been sleeping at the bottom of the Aegean Sea. And it had just woken up. As researchers carefully examined the corroded fragments over the following decades, a picture began to emerge. Slowly. Painstakingly. Like reading a book that time itself had tried to erase. In total, they had 82 fragments. 30 of those fragments contained interlocking bronze gears, tiny, perfectly cut, fitted together with a precision that would challenge modern craftsmen. The device dated back to approximately 205 B.C.E., making it over 2,000 years old. But what did it do? In 1956, Yale University professor Derek de Solla Price became the first person to seriously attempt an answer. Using early X-ray technology to peer inside the corroded bronze, he concluded something that stunned the academic world: the Antikythera mechanism was a computer. Not electronic, mechanical, but a computer in every meaningful sense of the word. It could track time across 3 separate calendars simultaneously. It could chart the movements of the sun and the moon across the sky. It could predict lunar eclipses. It could calculate the exact phase of the moon on any given date, waxing, waning, full, or new, years into the future. In other words, the ancient Greeks had built a handheld device that modeled the universe. A machine to unlock, as Price himself described it, the mysteries of the cosmos. But here is where the story stops being simply remarkable and becomes genuinely mysterious. The Antikythera mechanism did not appear at the end of a long tradition of mechanical engineering. It did not emerge from a culture that had been building complex machines for generations, gradually refining their craft until something like this became possible. It appeared, as far as we can tell, from nowhere. There is no evidence, not a single artifact, not a single written description of any other device approaching this level of mechanical complexity in the ancient Greek world. No prototypes. No earlier drafts. No simpler versions that might explain how the Greeks got from basic tools to this. There's no evidence that the ancient Greeks were able to build something like this, says Adam Wojcik, a researcher at University College London who has spent years studying the mechanism. It really is a mystery. And the mystery goes deeper still, because researchers have only ever recovered about a third of the original device. The rest, 2/3 of the most important machine ever built in the ancient world, remains lost. Perhaps still at the bottom of the Aegean Sea. Perhaps dissolved by centuries of salt water. Perhaps gone forever. What we have is a fragment of something larger. A chapter torn from a book we may never read in full. Science has not given up. In recent decades, researchers have returned to the Antikythera mechanism with tools its creators could never have imagined. Advanced X-ray tomography, three-dimensional computer modeling, surface imaging technology that can read text invisible to the naked eye. And with every new scan, every new analysis, the device reveals another layer of its genius. Researchers discovered inscriptions hidden inside the mechanism, a kind of instruction manual, written in ancient Greek, describing how to use the device and what it could calculate. They found that it could predict not just lunar eclipses, but solar ones too. They found evidence it may have tracked the movements of all 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, each one represented by a separate gear train inside the bronze casing. The more they looked, the more they found. And the harder the central question became to answer. How? How did someone, over 2,000 years ago, with no electricity, no computers, no precision manufacturing, no modern mathematics, how did someone design and build this? Some researchers believe the mechanism was the work of a single genius, perhaps a follower of Archimedes, the legendary Greek mathematician and inventor who lived around the same time. Archimedes was known to have built mechanical models of the solar system. Could this device have descended from his workshop, or from the tradition he inspired? Others believe it was the product of a school, a community of astronomers and craftsmen on the island of Rhodes, which was a known center of astronomical study in the ancient world. Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism was not a one-off miracle, but the finest surviving example of a tradition of mechanical astronomy that simply did not survive into the modern age. And that raises perhaps the most haunting question of all. What else did the ancient world build and lose? What other machines, what other devices, what other leaps of human ingenuity were created, used, and then swallowed by time, leaving no trace, no record, no fragment rusting on a seabed waiting to be found? The Antikythera mechanism now rests in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, Greece. What remains of it sits behind glass, corroded, incomplete, and still only partially understood after more than a century of study. It is, by almost any measure, the most important single object ever recovered from the ancient world. Not because of what it is made of. Not because of who built it. But because of what it tells us about the reach of the human mind across 2,000 years and across the bottom of the sea. The ancient Greeks looked up at the same sky we see tonight. They watched the same moon move through its phases. They tracked the same planets crossing the same stars. And somewhere, in a workshop we will never find, someone sat down and decided to build a machine that could predict it all. We still don't know exactly how they did it. And perhaps that is the most human thing about the Antikythera mechanism. Not that it was built, but that 2,000 years later, we are still looking at it, still turning it over in our hands, still scanning it with our most powerful tools, and still whispering the same question the ancient Greeks once had the answer to. How did they do it? The mystery remains.